In human life, experiences of loss is a normal and unavoidable event. It may be difficult to accept these losses, making a person feel devastated and weakened. But on the other hand, it can also be beneficial for one's personal development because this experience can allow a person to change, develop, and fulfill one's potential.
What was your initial or first reaction to loss?
Na-receive ang news na nawala na kong tita kay morning to siya pero wala ko na feel or
Product ko og broken family. So dugay ko nakasabot sa panghitabo sa mga family.
wala ko'y expressions, wala ko'y emotions at that time.
When I lost my friend, like sudden jud iyang pagkamatay is wala ko'y mabuhat because at that time layo pud kayo siya.
Kaingon jud ko na dili jud ay perfect among family. Kanang akong papa di ay naday siya laing babae, laing pang family. Dili lang day kami, daghan pa day siya anak kaysa sa mua na good so.
Later na hapon na katong na siya sa ilang balay, na feel ang pain, ang sadness kay nakita na jud ako ko ang tita na naa siya sa casket na naghigda na jud siya dito.
Na-hurt ko, kaya na-shock ko, ang ko, okay mi na family, happy me, but it's not.
Grief is the subjective emotions and affect which is a normal response when someone experiences loss. Undergoing the process by which a person experiences grief, also known as bereavement, we will get to know that it does not only involve the content, like what a person thinks, says, or feels, but also the process, which refers to how a person thinks, says, or feels. Grieving is known to be one of the most difficult and challenging processes of human existence because you can rarely describe it as comfortable or a pleasant experience. In this discussion, we will get to learn and discover the human experience of loss and how these people deal and move through bereavement and integrate the loss into their lives.
According to happiness.com, there are 8 types of grief. We may experience one or more while experiencing or dealing with a loss. The first one is the anticipatory grief. It is a kind of grief that you are expecting to happen. It is the least well-known grief. The second one is normal or common grief. Some people carry on with their normal routines despite the feeling of grief. Intensity of feelings gradually lessens over time until we find the new normal. The third one is complicated grief. It is experienced by a small percentage of people. Pain is so overwhelming that it actually prevents them from going about their daily lives. It is characterized by irrational thoughts. It makes the person feel trapped with no end in sight. They may develop self-harm or mental illnesses if the griever doesn't get the support he or she needed. The fourth one, it is the delayed grief. It doesn't appear immediately. Feelings grow stronger with time after having lost someone. Find it harder to cope months later than in the initial aftermath of the event. The fifth one is the inhibited grief. The griever avoids facing the realities of losing someone or something. They keep them distracted and they hide their feelings. The sixth one is the disfranchised grief. Disfranchised grief usually get little support or acceptance, as they feel no one else understands and they may struggle thinking that they must suppress their emotions. The seventh one is the absent grief. Absent grief are similar to inhibited grief in that the person silences their feelings and carries on as if nothing has happened. And the last one is the exaggerated grief. Exaggerated grief is similar to complicated grief, in that the sorrow and the inability to function don't improve over time. Experiencing several losses at the same time or over a short period of time, so the griever feels lost and unable to cope.
What was your biggest struggle while coping up with grief or loss?
My biggest struggle is not having an answer sa akong papa mismo. Kaya feel na ko all my life, feel na ko kami ang naimali. Na dili mi enough sa iyaha mismo as a family.
The biggest struggle I have coping up with grief and loss is when I have these random triggers. It is when I hear or see something that will remind me of the people I love and lost.
Siguro po yung pakikitungo sa akin ng tao at yung pakikitungo ko sa ibang tao. Kasi po para pong nag-iiba yung pakikitungo ng tao sa akin at parang hindi ko po yun gusto. Para po kasing nagiging pabigat ako kapag nag-iba po yung treatment nila sa akin.
Bring another flashback of our memories together, and for me it is quite a way on my healing process. Could potentially mess up my mind and my emotions all over again and put a stop on my healing process or moving on process.
First is physiological loss. It is where the physiological aspect of the person is affected. It could be loss of mobility, amputated legs. Next is safety loss. It is where personal security is affected. This is very evident in domestic violence, child abuse, and public violence. Third is loss of security and belongingness. Loss of loved one affects the need to love and the feeling of being loved. And this will lead to conflicts, or worse is it leads to separation of the family, divorces, and separation of the children from the family itself. Fourth is loss of self-esteem. Any change of how a person is valued in work or in relationship can threaten self-esteem. Lastly is loss related to self-actualization. It is an external or internal crisis that blocks or inhibits a person to strive towards fulfillment of goal. It also threatens personal goals and individual's potential.
Next is, have you thought of harming yourself or ending your life because of grief and loss?
Wala pa man po ko naabot ana na point. Murag makonsensya ko kung magunahuna ko ginato.
Wala. Because kato nahitabo sa akong friend, ang naparealize ako is dapat i-value jud di mo imong life.
Wala po akong naging ganong thoughts kasi para po sa akin endgame na yung ganong bagay. Escape po yun para sa iba, pero hindi ko po sila ikino-condemn.
No, never in my entire life na naghunahon ako na pasaktan akong sarili.
The acronym DABDA, which stands for Denial, Anger, Bargaining, Depression, and Acceptance, is part of the 5 stages of grief model by a Swiss psychiatrist named Elizabeth Ross. This was based with her work with terminally ill patients.
On their denial stage, they cannot fully grasp or accept their reality. All you need to do is to verbally support them and give them space to recognize their emotions or their feelings. Let them process the whole situation at their own pace. Second is the stage of anger. Help the person to understand that anger is a normal response to that certain situation. Watch over them and how they control their emotions. You have to ensure their safety. Third is the stage of bargaining. You have to listen to them attentively and encourage them to express their emotions to relieve the guilt and the irrational fear that they have in their hearts.
In the stage of depression, first thing to do is to allow the patient to express their sadness, communicate non-verbally by sitting quietly without expecting a conversation, convey care by touch, and help the support person to understand the importance of being with the client in silence. In the stage of acceptance, Help the family and friends to understand the client's decreased need to socialize and also the need for short and quiet visit. And also encourage the patient as much as possible to participate in the treatment program.
There are ways we can do to support someone who is grieving. So first is getting in touch. This is important. You may find yourself avoiding a friend or family member when someone close to them dies. You might be worried about saying the wrong things and making things worse, or be unsure what to say at all. Second is we can let them express their emotions. Ask them what they need. If there is a gathering after the funeral at their home, they may appreciate your help in getting everything ready. Let them know you're there for them and be sensitive to any changes in their mood.
Acknowledge what happened. Approach your friend by saying you know what's going on and how tragic it was. This shows that you know what's going on and your friend doesn't need to explain it. Lastly, listen and reassure your friend as they talk. This is very important because you are not only making them feel better, but also you are validating what they are feeling.
How long did it take for you to realize that it is time to move on?
For me, grieving does not have a timetable. It will solely depend on the person whether he or she still needs to grieve or he or she now decides to move forward.
Actually, from the very beginning, gidawat na namo since it is a anticipated kind of grief. Na expected na siya na mahitabo. So, wala na ako nagkuhan kanus ang tamang oras para mag-move on. From the start pa lang, from the day na nawala siya, gidawat na namo.
Wala pa na ako naisip because until now fresh pa jud kaayo ang pangitabo sa tanan. Wala ko kabalo ko kanus ana ko siya makita.
With the loss, we have to understand that it is a normal experience to every humankind. The difference is that to how we handle the grieving process itself. Not all people experience grief the same way because there is no actual pattern or exact pattern on how a person can overcome this grief or grieving process. But sadly, not all people can handle the grieving process on their own. That's why at some point, they need the help of the medical professionals. So us, student nurses, understanding and having the knowledge about the grieving process is important for us to help the clients properly. Help in a way that we can properly give assessment, we can give proper interventions for them to cope with the grieving process. And above all these assessment and interventions, we have to remember that the key to the success of having this is effective communication. So as nurses, we have to make sure that we are providing an effective communication to our clients who are experiencing loss.
Who can hold me? Who can hold me? Who can wrap their arms around me and keep me from falling in? Who can hold me?
It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to cry.
It's okay to feel the pain.
It's okay to be sad.
Because there is no timeline for healing.
Trust the process.
Feel the pain.
And remember,
You are not alone.